Some of it is documented human horror wearing the costume of conspiracy theory, specifically because that costume makes people dismiss it without looking. That's by design. The iceberg isn't just a list of theories. It's a map, and maps lead somewhere. I'm going to show you where this one goes. Stay with me.
Before we dive into today's investigation, I want to be clear. The stories and theories shared on this channel are part of an alternative history exploration. We're digging into the unexplained, the unsettling, and the what-ifs of our world. Think of this as a journey into the dark side of history, part research, part legend. Watch with an open mind, but remember, this is for narrative and entertainment purposes only.
There's a specific feeling you get at 3 a.m. when you find something on the internet that you weren't supposed to find. It's not excitement. It's not fear. It's something in between. A cold, electric hum in your chest, like your body is telling you that you have just stepped somewhere you cannot step back from. That feeling is what this whole video is about. The conspiracy theory iceberg didn't start as a video format or a Reddit thread or a YouTube genre. It started as a meme, a simple layered image like an actual iceberg with theories arranged from top to bottom. The stuff everyone knows at the surface. The stuff that makes people uncomfortable a little deeper. And then, near the bottom, things so far outside the mainstream that most people who see them refuse to believe they're real. I've spent the last 2 years going through that list. Not casually, obsessively. The way you do when something grabs you at 3 a.m. and doesn't let go. What I found changed how I see almost everything. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. Not everything on this iceberg is fiction. Some of it has been verified, declassified, confirmed by the very governments that denied it. Some of it is documented human horror wearing the costume of conspiracy theory, specifically because that costume makes people dismiss it without looking. That's by design. The iceberg isn't just a list of theories. It's a map, and maps lead somewhere. I'm going to show you where this one goes. Stay with me. Let's start at the surface. The part that almost everyone knows, or thinks they know. November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas. Dealey Plaza. A motorcade, a rifle shot, and a moment that cracked American history cleanly in half. The JFK assassination is the conspiracy theory. The one that mainstreamed the genre. The one that gave the term grassy knoll to the English language. And before you roll your eyes and say you've heard it all before, I need you to sit with one specific fact. The Warren Commission, the official investigation, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. One man, one rifle, 3 shots from a book depository window. But in 1979, 16 years later, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reviewed the same evidence and reached a different conclusion. They found, based on acoustic evidence, that there was a high probability that a second gunman fired from the grassy knoll. They concluded Kennedy was probably the victim of a conspiracy. That's not a theory. That's a second official government investigation contradicting the first official government investigation. The people in Dealey Plaza that day, the ones who heard the shots, felt the pressure waves, turned toward the grassy knoll because their bodies told them that's where the sound came from. They were right. The witnesses who saw men running. The doctors at Parkland Memorial who described the wound pattern as consistent with a frontal shot. All of it still unresolved, still officially open. What dies with a president isn't just a man. It's a version of reality, the one where the people in charge are more or less protecting you. That version died in Dallas, and we have never fully recovered from it. This one isn't a theory. I want to be very clear about that before I say another word. The MK Ultra program is not speculation. It is not rumor. It is documented, declassified, and confirmed by the CIA itself, after the documents were accidentally preserved when they were supposed to be destroyed. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America ran a covert program to develop mind control techniques. They dosed unwitting American and Canadian citizens with LSD. They subjected prisoners and mental patients to sensory deprivation, electroshock therapy, and hypnosis, all without consent, all without knowledge. They partnered with universities, hospitals, and prisons to conduct experiments on people who had no idea they were experimental subjects. One of those people was a man named Frank Olson, a government scientist who, after being secretly dosed with LSD at a work retreat, fell from a window of a New York hotel 13 days later. It was ruled a suicide. His family didn't learn about the LSD for 22 years. His son spent the rest of his life trying to prove his father was murdered. There was a woman, I won't use her name because her family still lives with this, who was admitted to a Canadian psychiatric hospital in 1957 for mild depression. She was kept under medically induced sleep for 86 days. 86 days. During that time, she was subjected to repeated electroshock treatments and had recordings played into her ears on loop. When she woke up, she had forgotten how to read. She had forgotten how to talk. She had forgotten who she was. She was not a spy. She was not a criminal. She was a person who went to a hospital for help. The government did that, and then they lied about it for decades, and we still talk about it like it's a conspiracy theory. 1962. America and the Soviet Union are locked in the most dangerous standoff in human history. The Cuban Missile Crisis is less than a year away. And in a conference room in Washington, D.C., a group of senior United States military officials drew up a plan to murder American citizens on American soil and blame it on Cuba. They called it Operation Northwoods. The plan included sinking a boatload of Cuban refugees, blowing up a drone aircraft disguised as a passenger jet and claiming Cuba shot it down, staging terrorist attacks in Miami and Washington, conducting a fake communist Cuban terror campaign in American cities. The goal was to manufacture a justification for a U.S. military invasion of Cuba. General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, signed off on it. The memo went to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. It was presented to President Kennedy. Kennedy rejected it. He fired Lemnitzer shortly after. And that's where the official story ends. Kennedy said no, so nothing happened, and we should move on. But here's the part that should fundamentally alter how you think about everything you've ever been told. The plan existed, unanimously approved by the Joint Chiefs, fully documented. The military leadership of the United States of America looked at a memo describing the murder of American civilians as a false flag operation and said, "Yes, this is a good idea. Let's bring it to the president." The only reason it didn't happen is because one man said no. What happens when the man in charge doesn't say no? That question has been hanging in the air since 1962, and it has never been satisfactorily answered. There are 9 of them, 9 hikers, students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Young, experienced, well-equipped, led by a man named Igor Dyatlov, after whom the entire incident would eventually be named. February 1959, the northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, a ski trek through one of the most remote, hostile landscapes on the planet. They set up camp on the slope of a mountain the indigenous Mansi people called Dead Mountain, Kolitsayakal, and sometime in the early hours of February 2nd, something happened. We know what happened from the outside in. We know that their tent was cut open from the inside. From the inside, meaning they cut their own way out rather than use the entrance. We know they ran out into temperatures that would kill an unprotected human being in minutes. We know they had no boots, no proper clothing. They ran into the darkness of a Russian winter night in their socks. The official Soviet investigation concluded the hikers died from a compelling unknown force. A compelling unknown force. That's the official answer. Here's what the physical evidence showed. 4 of them had catastrophic internal injuries, broken ribs, crushed chests, a fractured skull. Injuries that a Soviet forensic expert compared to the result of a car crash, massive blunt force trauma, but with no external bruising. One of them was missing her tongue, her eyes. The radiation levels on their clothing were elevated. There were reports from witnesses of glowing orange spheres in the sky that night. Whatever those 9 people saw when they cut open that tent, whatever was outside in the dark that was worse than certain death by freezing, they took it with them, and we have never been able to reconstruct it. What do you do when the most terrifying explanation is the one that can't be named? Denver International Airport opened in 1995. It was more than a year late. It cost $4.8 billion, twice the original estimate. And it is covered, from the concourse murals to the underground tunnels to the public art installations, in imagery that has never been satisfactorily explained. Let me walk you through what's actually there. There are murals, large, prominent, commission murals in the main terminal. One of them depicts a gas-masked military figure in a Nazi-style uniform, standing over the bodies of dead children, with doves and flags from various nations destroyed at his feet. Another shows the same children handing weapons to a central figure, offering up the tools of destruction in exchange for peace. The airport's floor has Masonic symbols embedded in the terrazzo. There are gargoyles positioned, watching over the main hall. There are time capsule plaques signed by something called the New World Airport Commission, an organization that does not appear to exist anywhere in the public record. And then there is the horse, a 32-foot blue stallion with glowing red eyes, rearing up at the entrance of the airport. Its creator, Luis Jimenez, was killed during its construction when the sculpture fell on him and severed an artery. A 32-foot blue demon horse with glowing red eyes, at the entrance to one of the largest airports in North America, that killed its own creator. And nobody thought to ask why? The official answer is always art. Art is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Denver. Art is explaining a lot of things in that airport that probably deserve a more specific explanation. What are they telling us? Or warning us? And who exactly is they? I have seen the elevator footage. You probably have too. But let me describe it to you the way I saw it the first time, before I knew what it was, before I knew the name or the outcome, just as a piece of raw video that someone sent to me without context. A young woman in an elevator. She's pressing every floor button. She's hiding in the corner. She's moving in and out of the elevator doors. Her behavior is erratic, but not violent, not aggressive. She looks like someone who is frightened, or confused, or both. Then the doors open on one floor, and several people try to get in. She presses herself into the corner. They can't figure out why the elevator isn't moving. They get out. The doors close. She keeps pressing buttons. The video ends. Her name was Elisa Lam. She was 21 years old, a Canadian student traveling alone in Los Angeles. She was staying at the Cecil Hotel, a hotel with such a documented history of violence, suicide, and serial killer residency that it had been renamed Stay on Main, specifically to escape the association. Guests at the Cecil Hotel began complaining about the water in mid-February 2013. Low pressure, dark color, strange taste. Maintenance checked the roof. Elisa Lam's body was found in one of the rooftop water tanks. She had been there for approximately 19 days. The water tank was locked. The roof required a key or an alarm bypass. There was no evidence of another person. The coroner ruled her death accidental drowning. Bipolar disorder was listed as a contributing factor. The elevator footage was never satisfactorily explained. The way she moves, the way she looks out into a hallway that, on the recording, appears empty. What she sees, what she's responding to, nobody knows what she saw. The water kept running for 19 days. The USS Eldridge, destroyer escort, United States Navy, October 1943. The official record states the Eldridge was in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard on October 28, 1943. The unofficial record, the one that has persisted for more than 80 years and refuses to die, states something very different. The story goes like this. The Navy, using theoretical work derived from Albert Einstein's unified field theory, attempted to render the USS Eldridge invisible to radar and possibly to the naked eye. The experiment allegedly worked too well. The ship disappeared not from radar, but from physical space. For a period of time, it ceased to exist in the location it had previously occupied. It reportedly appeared briefly in the harbor at Norfolk, Virginia, 300 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia. The sailors aboard reportedly suffered catastrophically. Men found fused to the metal of the ship's hull. Men who went insane. Men who spontaneously combusted. Men who would fade out, become partially or fully invisible at random intervals, sometimes for the rest of their lives. There is a man named Carlos Allende who claimed to have witnessed the entire event from a nearby merchant vessel. He wrote annotations in a copy of a physics book and mailed it to the Navy. He was investigated. He was dismissed as mentally unstable. The Navy's official position is that the Eldridge never participated in any such experiment, that it wasn't even in Philadelphia on that date. They have logs, they have records, but the survivors' accounts exist. The stories have internal consistency, and the Navy has a documented history of running experiments it later denies. When the institution and the survivors disagree, who do you believe? This one is harder to talk about, not because it's complex, because it involves children, because it involves dead children, and a government that stole from them after they were already gone, and parents who were never told. Project Sunshine was a United States Atomic Energy Commission program that ran in the 1950s. Its stated purpose was to study the effects of nuclear fallout on the human body, specifically the absorption of strontium-90, a radioactive isotope produced by nuclear weapons testing, into bone tissue. To study this, they needed bone samples, fresh bone samples, from recently deceased individuals across a range of ages. They specifically needed infant and child samples because young, developing bone absorbs strontium-90 at a higher rate than adult bone. So they took them. They built an international network of contacts, morgues, hospitals, coroners, who would provide body parts from deceased infants and children, without asking the parents, without telling the parents. In some cases, removing limbs from the bodies of dead children before families could claim them for burial. A mother would bury her child. She would not know that her child went into the ground missing a leg. One Australian researcher, acting as an agent for the program, described the difficulty of obtaining enough samples. He noted that the competition for infant cadavers was intense. Competition for infant cadavers. This program was real. These documents exist. This happened in the 1950s in the United States and Australia and the United Kingdom, and it was not publicly revealed until decades later. And it was not done by monsters. It was done by scientists in labs with government funding and official approval. That's what makes it the most horrifying thing on this tier of the iceberg. Evil, most of the time, doesn't look like evil. It looks like paperwork. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, Boston, New York. In the streets of these cities, embedded in the asphalt, cemented into the intersections, pressed into the pavement, there are tiles, mysterious, cryptic tiles, appearing without explanation and disappearing without warning when streets are repaved. They are called the Toynbee tiles, after a phrase that appears on many of them. Toynbee idea in Kubrick's 2001 Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter. That's the message. That's it. That's all they say. Some variations exist. Some tiles include rants about journalists, about government conspiracies, about enemies. But the core message is always the same. Resurrect the dead on Jupiter. The tiles are handmade. They appear to be constructed from layers of linoleum, tar paper, and asphalt crack filler, pressed into the road surface in a way that makes them almost impossible to remove cleanly. Whoever made them had skills, had a system, had patience. They appeared for decades, probably from the 1980s onward, in multiple East Coast cities, installed in the middle of heavily trafficked intersections during the dead of night, in locations that would have required the creator to lie in traffic for extended periods to place them correctly. A documentary crew eventually traced the tiles to a reclusive Philadelphia man named Sevi Brodsky. He had died before the documentary was completed. He was never publicly identified during his lifetime. He lived near a storm drain that appeared to connect to an understreet location near one of the tile sites. He had a car. He had a rope and board device that could lower materials through the drain. He spent years, possibly decades, pressing messages into the streets of American cities. Messages about resurrecting the dead on Jupiter. Not because he was told to, not for money, because he believed it. And honestly, I think about him more than I think about most people who appear in history books. Your brain is lying to you right now. Not metaphorically, literally. Every time you remember something, your brain reconstructs that memory from fragments. It doesn't play it back like a video. It reassembles it, and every time it reassembles it, small errors creep in. Small changes. And over years, those small changes compound until the memory you're certain of is not the event that actually happened. This is documented neuroscience. It is not controversial. Memory researchers have known this for decades. The Mandela effect, the phenomenon of large groups of people sharing identical false memories, is named after Nelson Mandela, whom millions of people remember dying in prison in the 1980s. He didn't. He was released in 1990, became president of South Africa, and died in 2013. The Berenstain Bears children's books, spelled Brenstein, but a significant portion of the population, adults who grew up with these books, who read them hundreds of times, remember with absolute certainty that they were spelled Brenstein. They are wrong. The books, the original books, have always been Berenstain. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night about the Mandela effect. The mainstream explanation, collective false memory, social suggestion, the malleability of human recollection, is itself unsettling. Because if we accept it, we have to accept that our memories, our most fundamental sense of personal continuity, are deeply unreliable. And if our memories can be wrong about a spelling, what else are they wrong about? What if the institutions and the governments and the history books you were taught from are counting on exactly that unreliability? What if the most sophisticated form of control isn't changing what happens, but changing what you remember? How would you know? In the years before Yuri Gagarin became the first human being officially acknowledged to have traveled to space, 2 amateur radio operators in Italy were picking up something disturbing. Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia, brothers, operating from a homemade listening station they called Tory Burke. Between 1960 and 1964, they claimed to have intercepted at least 9 transmissions suggesting that Soviet cosmonauts had been lost in space before Gagarin's 1961 mission. The recordings exist. I have listened to them. Some of them are clearly radio noise. Some of them are ambiguous. But some of them, and I want you to really hear me when I say this, some of them are not easily dismissed. There is a recording from May 1961 after Gagarin, but before several other official Soviet missions, that appears to capture a male voice transmitting a distress signal in Morse code. SOS. Repeated, growing fainter. There is a recording from November 1963 that appears to capture a voice, a female voice, speaking in Russian. The translation, as best as it has been rendered, "Isn't this dangerous? I'll re-enter. I see a flame. Am I going to crash? Yes, I feel hot. I will re-enter. Then nothing. The Soviet Union denied everything. They denied every recording. They denied every cosmonaut. Their record of space achievement, they insisted, was exactly what they had publicly stated. No losses, no secrets, no one died. They also denied for decades that their first satellite, Sputnik, had any military application. They were lying about that. They denied that they had ever attempted to land a probe on the moon before the Americans. They were lying about that too. A government that lies systematically about space exploration denied that people died in space. Somewhere, there may be a woman who went to orbit and was told the ground would catch her. The ground did not catch her. But for the iceberg, here's what you need to know. In 2012, an anonymous post appeared on 4chan's message board containing an image and a message. We are looking for highly intelligent individuals. What followed was one of the most complex, multi-layered, international puzzle sequences ever documented. It moved from internet forums to cryptographic software to subreddits to physical posters near international airports to phone numbers to ancient book ciphers. It spanned years. It recruited across multiple countries. And it selected a small number of solvers who received private communications and were never heard from publicly again. The most credible theories about its origin range from an elite privacy-focused hacker collective to a government intelligence recruitment operation. Both explanations fit the evidence equally well. Neither has been confirmed. But here's what I want to add to the iceberg conversation specifically. Cicada 3301 demonstrated something that should change how you think about the institutions around you. It demonstrated that an organization of unknown size and funding can operate at a global level, across multiple governments' jurisdictions, for years without a single member being identified. In a surveillance state, in an age of digital forensics, with thousands of people actively trying to find them. The Cicada can do that, what else can? Who else is running puzzles you don't know you're inside? This one comes from Brazil. August 17, 1966, a hill called Morro do Vintém, in the city of Niterói, near Rio de Janeiro. Two men found dead, side by side, neatly laid out, wearing formal suits, and over their eyes, lead masks, not goggles, not safety equipment, handmade lead-eye masks pressed over their faces. Their names were Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana, both electronic technicians, both respectable, ordinary men with families and jobs and no known history of mental illness or criminal activity. Next to them, an empty water bottle, 2 wet towels, and a small notebook. The notebook contained instructions, written in handwriting belonging to one of the men. The instructions said, and I'm reading from the translated account, at 16:30 be at the agreed place. At 18:30 ingest capsules. After the effect protect metals await signal. They took something. They put on lead masks to protect their eyes from something. They waited for a signal. The toxicology report was inconclusive. No traces of any known poison or drug were found. But the bodies had been on the hill for several days in Brazilian summer heat before discovery, which compromised the results. No capsules were found. No source of the capsules was identified. No other person was ever placed at the scene. No signal was ever identified. The case is officially listed as unsolved. In 50 years of investigation, Brazilian police have produced no credible explanation for what the two men believed they were waiting for, or what they thought the lead masks would protect them from. They died waiting, expecting something to arrive. Nothing that we know of ever did. There is a document, not a theory document, not a leaked memo of uncertain provenance. An actual signed, peer-reviewed document produced by the United States Army in 1983. It is titled Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. It was produced by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne M. McDonnell. It was classified for 30 years. In 2003, it was released under the Freedom of Information Act, and it describes the CIA's formal scientific investigation of astral projection. Not as a metaphor, not as a psychological study of people who believe in astral projection, as an actual phenomenon to be understood, replicated, and potentially weaponized. The document describes consciousness as a holographic projection. It describes time as nonlinear. It describes the ability of trained human consciousness to separate from the physical body and move through space and time. And it concludes, a United States Army document concludes, that these abilities are real, are accessible through specific training protocols, and have genuine national security implications. Page 25 is missing, has always been missing, was missing when the document was originally declassified. No explanation has ever been provided for what was on page 25 or where it went. The document that exists describes a universe built from resonant energy fields. Consciousness as an energy structure that persists beyond physical death. The suggestion that trained operators could access information across time, past and future, by achieving specific altered states. And the Army's conclusion was not, "This is nonsense, this is pseudoscience, we are embarrassed to have spent resources on it." The conclusion was, "This works, and we need to understand it better." Page 25 presumably explained what better looked like. Someone took that page, and they have never given it back. The hollow earth theory says that the interior of the earth is not molten rock and iron but a habitable space. Some versions say it contains a second sun. Some say it contains an advanced civilization. Some say Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the famous American explorer who led multiple expeditions to Antarctica and the Arctic, discovered it and was ordered to keep it secret. The supposed evidence is a diary allegedly kept by Byrd describing a flight in 1947 that somehow penetrated the interior of the Earth through an opening at the North Pole. The diary describes a land of mountains and green valleys and mammoths. It describes a meeting with an advanced race that warned Byrd about human nuclear development. The diary is almost certainly not authentic. There are anachronisms in the text. The dates don't align with Byrd's documented movements. I want to be honest about that. But here's what is real. There are structures at both poles that we don't fully understand. There is a consistent gravitational anomaly over Antarctica that has never been completely explained. There were classified military operations in Antarctica in the 1940s, Operations High Jump and Deep Freeze, whose full scope has never been publicly disclosed. Scientists have identified vast liquid water systems beneath the Antarctic ice, some of them connected in ways that are not fully mapped. And Byrd, the real Byrd, said something in 1947 that is documented on record in a Chilean newspaper interview. He warned that the United States needed to be prepared for a potential threat coming from the polar regions. He described it as potentially faster moving and more serious than any previous military threat the country had faced. He didn't elaborate. He was never asked to elaborate in any official capacity. What does a polar explorer know that a general strategist doesn't? And why would a man of Byrd's stature use those specific words? In 1960, a Scottish astronomer named Duncan Lunnan claimed to have decoded a series of strange radio echoes that had been recorded in the late 1920s. Echoes that appeared to be returning from somewhere out in space, long after they should have dissipated. The echoes had a pattern. The delays were not random. When Lunnan mapped the delay intervals, he claimed they produced a star map, specifically, a map of a star system as it would have appeared 13,000 years ago, from a perspective centered on the star Epsilon Boötis. He believed the echoes were a calling card, a navigation signal, left by someone or something in orbit around Earth 13,000 years ago. That object in orbit is what people now call the Black Knight satellite. The supposed evidence includes NASA photographs from the 1998 Space Shuttle Endeavour mission that appear to show an unidentified object in orbit dark, angular, seemingly structured. NASA's official explanation is that the object is a thermal blanket lost during an EVA. The object is approximately the right size and the right shape for a thermal blanket. It is also approximately the right shape for something that is not a thermal blanket. Here's what I keep coming back to. The 1920s radio echo anomaly is real. It was documented by multiple researchers independently. The explanation that these were simply long-delay echoes caused by ionospheric interference is accepted by most scientists. But it was accepted without the echoes being fully reproduced experimentally. It was accepted because it was the most convenient explanation, not because it was proven. Lunnan later retracted his star map interpretation. He said his methodology had errors, but the echoes were still there. They were still delayed, and nobody has fully explained what was returning them or from where. Camp Hero, Montauk Point, Long Island, a decommissioned Air Force base on the easternmost tip of New York, sitting above a Cold War-era radar installation that was officially closed in 1981. The Montauk Project is what allegedly happened there after it was closed. The claims come primarily from two men, Preston Nichols and Al Bielek, who say they worked at the facility during the 1970s and early 1980s as part of secret government experiments. The experiments, they say, involve time travel, mind control, the deliberate traumatization of children to develop psychic abilities, and at least one catastrophic incident in which a creature, a physical entity manifested from the mind of a test subject, destroyed part of the facility before it could be contained. The entity was called the Montauk Monster, not the creature that washed up on the shore years later. Something else. Something produced by a boy named Duncan Cameron, allegedly the same individual involved in the Philadelphia experiment, brought forward through time. I need to be very clear. I cannot verify any of this. Nichols and Bielek's accounts are internally inconsistent. There are no corroborating witnesses from within the alleged program. The documents they present are not authenticated. But here is what is not disputed. Camp Hero exists. The radar equipment exists. The underground bunkers exist, and they are extensive, and they have never been fully mapped by civilian investigators. There were classified programs operating out of Long Island during the Cold War, and certain people in the surrounding communities have, for decades, reported lights, sounds, and experiences near the facility that they have never been able to explain. Not everything that happens in the dark leaves a paper trail. Sometimes it just leaves a feeling, a specific cold feeling. The one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that doesn't let you go. His name, the police eventually figured out, was Charles Gordon Somerton. But it took 73 years. On December 1st, 1948, a man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was well-dressed, perfectly groomed. He had no identification. His clothing had all the labels removed. He had a train ticket stub, a bus ticket, a pack of chewing gum, some cigarettes, and in a small pocket sewn into the waistband of his trousers, hidden, a concealed pocket that tailors of the era didn't typically include, a tiny rolled piece of paper with two words printed on it, Tamam Shud. It means it is ended in Persian. The words had been torn from the last page of a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The book from which it was torn was eventually found, abandoned in an unlocked car parked near the beach. Inside the back cover, a phone number and a sequence of letters that appeared to be an enciphered message. The code has never been cracked. The woman associated with the phone number, identified but protected by Australian authorities for decades, denied knowing who the man was. Her daughter, years later, said her mother did know him, said she had known him in the 1940s, said he had been a spy. In 2022, a forensic researcher finally identified him through DNA and genealogical research. Charles Gordon Somerton, Born 1903, a man with no apparent reason to be dead on an Australian beach, with a hidden message from an impossible book in a concealed pocket of his clothing. The enciphered message still hasn't been decoded. Whatever Tamam should meant to him, whatever was ended, went with him into the ground. And some of it is still in that back cover. I want you to think about the last time you had a genuine conversation online. Not a debate, not a comment thread. A real conversation where you felt like the other person was actually present, actually thinking, actually responding to what you specifically said rather than to a category of what you said. Try to remember it. Put a rough date on it. Dead internet theory was first articulated on a fringe forum called WizardChan in 2021. The claim, the internet, the publicly accessible, social media-driven, algorithmically curated internet that most people experience daily, has been artificially inflated since approximately 2016 or 2017 by a massive proliferation of bots, AI-generated content, and automated engagement systems. The result: most of the activity you see online is not human. Most of the accounts are not people. Most of the comments are not written by individuals who read the thing they're commenting on. The impression of a vast, buzzing, living network of human communication is, in large part, an illusion, a stage set, a Potemkin village of personhood. The uncomfortable part is that this theory is not obviously wrong. The percentage of internet traffic attributable to bots has been estimated at over 40% by some cybersecurity researchers. Platforms built on engagement metrics have powerful financial incentives to inflate those metrics. The advent of large language models has made it trivially easy to generate human-seeming text at scale. And here's the thing I can't get past. If you were surrounded by bots designed to seem like people, and you were shown a community of 3,000 people all reinforcing the same worldview, how would you know which 3,000 were real? You wouldn't. You'd feel the community and call it real because community is what your brain is looking for. The loneliest possible version of this theory is the one that's most consistent with how the internet actually behaves. You've been talking to the void, and the void has been very carefully talking back. I need you to actually think about this one, not as entertainment, as a genuine proposition. What if consciousness persists after death? Not in a religious sense, not in a metaphysical sense, in a scientific sense. In the sense that a United States government document stamped, signed, and now publicly available seriously proposed it. The Gateway Experience, the training program developed at the Monroe Institute and later studied by the Army, is built on a specific physical hypothesis. The universe is not made of matter and energy in the conventional sense. It is made of resonant energy patterns. Everything, every object, every thought, every conscious experience is a pattern of resonating energy within a larger field. Consciousness on this model is also a resonant energy pattern. And energy patterns don't disappear. They transform. They dissipate into the larger field and persist in a different configuration. The Army document doesn't quite say the soul is immortal, but it says something structurally very similar. That the pattern of energy that constitutes a conscious self does not simply cease when the body stops functioning. And then there's the implication that follows from this: if consciousness persists, and if trained consciousness can access information across time, past and future, as the document describes, then the things we call ghosts or visions or premonitions are not supernatural. They are physics. They are resonant energy patterns from other points in time, intersecting with the present. What you feel in an old building, the specific weight of a place where something terrible happened, the sense of being watched in an empty room. The Army thinks that might be real. The Army spent money and personnel hours investigating whether it was real. The Army classified the results. Whatever is on page 25, they didn't want you to know it. 1981, Portland, Oregon. Maybe. No confirmed physical evidence of the game's existence has ever been found. But the stories are consistent enough and specific enough and have persisted long enough that they deserve to be described. The game was called Polybius. It appeared in arcades, according to the reports, around 1981. It looked like a standard vector graphics arcade game of the era. Geometric shapes, simple animations, the kind of thing you'd find in any arcade next to Tempest or Asteroids. But players reported that Polybius made them feel wrong. Not motion sickness, not eye strain, something deeper. Amnesia, nightmares, insomnia, seizures. A persistent, hard-to-describe sense of wrongness that followed them out of the arcade and into their sleep. And, according to the legends, men in black suits would visit the arcades where Polybius machines had been placed. They would open the machines. They would take something from inside. They wouldn't speak to anyone. They would leave. The theory is that Polybius was a real government experiment, a field test of neurological manipulation through visual stimulus, conducted in public arcades on unwitting civilian subjects. The men in black were collecting the data. Is there evidence? No physical machine has ever been authenticated. No developer has been identified. No internal documents have surfaced. But here's what is real. The United States military has extensively studied the neurological effects of specific visual and auditory stimuli as a potential weapons platform. Non-lethal weapons research in this area is documented. The idea that a visual stimulus could be designed to produce specific neurological states, confusion, submission, cognitive disruption, is not science fiction. It is an active field of military research. Polybius is either a legend or a field test that was successfully kept secret. And the fact that we can't tell the difference is the whole point. This one is quiet. That's what makes it terrifying. In 2008, a Reddit user named Religion of Peace died. He was an elderly man who had operated a small, obscure subreddit, a forum dedicated to antique furniture restoration of all things. Nothing notable, barely active. He had posted regularly for years and then simply stopped. After his death, other users investigating his account found something strange. His forum, hosted on Reddit's infrastructure, contained links. Specific links buried in the sidebar and in certain posts that led to other locations on the internet. Locations that were not antique furniture forums. The links led to what appeared to be job listings. Extremely specific, extremely technical job listings for positions that did not have publicly searchable descriptions. The positions seemed to involve fieldwork. The qualifications required were not the kind that appear on standard resumes. Some users who followed the thread, who pulled at the threads, who started mapping the network of links, reported being contacted by unknown individuals who knew things about them that they had not made public. Some of those users stopped posting. Lake City Quiet Pills is the name now associated with this rabbit hole. Quiet Pills, some researchers concluded, was a metaphor for professional assassination. The forum was, allegedly, a private hiring board for military contractors and mercenaries. The old man who ran the antique furniture forum was, allegedly, a man with a very different kind of past. And when he died, the board was left running. Whether it's still running, whether the links still work, whether the positions are still open, I can't tell you. I stopped following those threads when I realized that following them might not be as passive as it seems. Some doors announce themselves, some don't. What if everything you see is not the base reality? This is simulation theory, and I know how it sounds. I know it sounds like something you discuss freshman year of college at 2 in the morning. But I need you to hear it the way serious people, physicists, philosophers, the people who think for a living, actually frame it. The argument in its strongest form goes like this. If a civilization develops the capacity to run detailed simulations of conscious experience, and we are already building rudimentary versions of exactly this, then the total number of simulated conscious experiences will vastly outnumber the real ones. If simulated consciousness is possible in principle, then at any given moment, the probability that you are one of the simulated instances rather than one of the original ones is overwhelming. This is not mysticism. This is a probability argument, and it has never been formally refuted. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at Oxford, not a fringe figure, published this argument in 2003 in a peer-reviewed academic journal. It is taken seriously by serious people. Elon Musk has publicly stated he believes the odds we are living in base reality are 1 in billions. Neil deGrasse Tyson has said he finds the argument compelling. Here's what keeps it out of pure philosophy and in the iceberg. If we are in a simulation, then everything you call anomalous is actually just code behaving in unexpected ways. Every ghost, every Mandela effect, every instance of something that shouldn't have happened but did. These are not supernatural events. They are artifacts. They are what happens when the simulation's underlying code produces an output it wasn't optimized to suppress. The paranormal isn't outside the system. It's inside the system, and someone is running it. The question is, what does the interface look like from the other side? There is a geometric shape at the North Pole of Saturn. Not a metaphor, not an artistic description. An actual, measurable, persistent hexagonal storm pattern, approximately 30,000 kilometers across, sitting at the planet's North Pole, that has been rotating consistently, continuously for at least 40 years. Possibly much longer. The Voyager mission photographed it in 1980. The Cassini mission photographed it in exhaustive detail between 2004 and 2017. It has not changed in shape. It has not dissipated. It does not behave the way naturally occurring planetary storms behave. A hexagon is a specific shape. It is the shape produced when 6 rotating vortices are arranged around a central system. It appears in soap bubbles, in beehives, in certain crystal formations. It is a shape that emerges from natural systems operating under specific physical constraints. But a hexagon 30,000 kilometers across, persisting for decades at the pole of a gas giant? The physics are not clearly understood. Here's where the iceberg goes deep. The hexagon appears in occult symbolism with a frequency that is either coincidental or deeply suggestive, depending on your prior commitments. The Seal of Solomon, certain Masonic symbols, the 6-pointed star in various religious and mystical traditions, the hexagon as a representation of harmonic resonance, of cosmic order, of the fundamental structure underlying perceptible reality. Some researchers argue that Saturn has been associated with occult practice since ancient times for a reason. That there is something about Saturn, its rings, its resonance, the specific electromagnetic signals it broadcasts, that has always been detectable by sensitive observers, long before telescopes existed. What are those signals? Where do they go? The universe is not quiet. It is full of transmissions. We are only beginning to understand which ones are addressed to us. The SCP Foundation began as a collaborative fiction project on the internet in 2008. SCP stands for Secure, Contain, Protect. The premise is simple. A secret government organization that discovers, captures, and contains anomalous objects and entities that would destabilize reality if the public knew about them. The articles are written in bureaucratic report style, clinical, dry, procedural, which creates a specific, deeply effective horror. It's not the monster that's terrifying. It's the form you fill out to describe the monster. Here is the thing I need to say carefully. I have spoken to a man, I interviewed him online, his account is still active, who believes with genuine, non-ironic conviction that the SCP Foundation is not fiction but disclosure. That the articles, while fictionalized, contain real operational security protocols and real descriptions of actual contained entities, published under the cover of collaborative fiction specifically because the cover of fiction provides plausible deniability. He had reasons, not conclusive reasons, but reasons. He pointed to specific SCP articles whose descriptions match, in general structural terms, classified government files that were partially declassified and then reclassified in the 1990s. He pointed to the way certain Foundation protocols align, in their operational logic, with procedures described in real government documents about containment and information control. He could not prove it, but here's the question that the SCP Foundation genuinely raises. If a government did have anomalous entities that it was containing, and if it decided that the safest way to hide the information was in plain sight, embedded in a fictional collaborative archive that people would read as entertainment, would you be able to tell the difference? Would you want to? There is no narrator's guide for what comes next on the iceberg. There is no clean label. There is no cultural reference that makes it comfortable. The Backrooms is an internet phenomenon that emerged from a single image, a yellowed, carpeted, fluorescent-lit office space, seemingly infinite, liminal, deeply wrong in a way that is almost impossible to articulate. The image appeared on 4chan in 2019. The caption beneath it said, "If you're not careful and you knocklip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms." Knocklip is a video game term, a cheat code that removes collision physics. You fall through the floor of the game world. You end up somewhere behind the geometry, in the void, in the negative space, in the parts of the architecture that were never meant to be seen. The Backrooms theory is that this can happen in physical reality. That certain locations, certain moments, certain specific kinds of wrong movement or wrong perception can cause a person to slip sideways, out of the world they know, into somewhere else. A place that looks like human construction, offices, corridors, warehouse spaces, but is not inhabited, has never been inhabited, goes on without end. The horror is not violence. There are no monsters in the purest version of the Backrooms, though the mythology has expanded to include them. The horror is the space itself, the carpet, the fluorescent hum, the smell of wet cardboard and old mildew, the way the corridors repeat in ways that should be geometrically impossible, the sound of something in a room you can never quite reach. People who describe sleep paralysis or certain dissociative episodes, or the specific terror of waking in an unfamiliar place and not knowing for a moment where or what you are, they describe something structurally very similar to the Backrooms. The Backrooms may be fiction. It may be the best description anyone has produced of what the inside of a fractured consciousness feels like. The scariest possibility is that it's both. You are already dead. Not now. Not in this timeline. In another one very close to this one, a version of you made a slightly different decision. Stepped into traffic a half-second earlier. Made a choice that put a different set of physics in motion. In that timeline, you died. But you don't remember it. Because you, the conscious experience that identifies itself as you, never experiences its own death. The moment of death is the moment the experience ends. And consciousness, on the model proposed by quantum immortality, always shifts to the branch of the quantum multiverse in which the conscious observer survives. This is a genuine theoretical proposition derived from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's not accepted by most physicists. It's also not definitively refuted. The implication, you have survived thousands of events that killed other versions of you. You are, in some sense, the luckiest person you know. Not because the universe favors you, but because the universe is the sum of all possible outcomes and you are always, by definition, in the branch where you survived. The horror arrives when you ask, what does this mean for people who suffer? If consciousness always shifts to the branch of survival, then some versions of consciousness shift into branches of survival that involve extreme suffering. The version of you that survived the car crash but barely. The version that survived the diagnosis but lives with consequences. Quantum immortality doesn't promise a good life. Promises only that some version of the experience continues. You don't get to choose which version you land in. And somewhere in a branch very close to this one, A version of you is trying to understand how they got here. They're not sure they're glad they survived. Here is the most frightening thing I know. The Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi, 1950. A lunch conversation at Los Alamos. Someone was discussing a recent newspaper story about extraterrestrial life, and Fermi, famously, said, "But where is everybody? The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. The probability that Earth is the only location where conditions for complex life have arisen, given the sheer scale of what we're working with, is, by most scientific assessments, vanishingly small. So where are they? The most unsettling answer is the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a concept developed by economist Robin Hanson. It proposes that there exists, somewhere in the development path from simple chemistry to interstellar civilization, one or more barriers that almost no species successfully crosses. A filter so catastrophically effective that the observable universe is silent. The terrifying question: are we behind the filter or in front of it? If the filter is in our past, if we are the rare, miraculous exception that crossed it, then we are alone in the universe, which is its own specific horror. But we are safe. Whatever killed everyone else, we survived. If the filter is ahead of us, if the silence of the universe is not because civilizations couldn't develop, but because something kills them before they can be heard, then the silence is not emptiness. It is the moment before. And whatever is coming for every civilization that reaches our level of development is coming for us too. We are currently producing detectable electromagnetic signals that have been radiating outward into space for approximately 100 years. Something may have heard us. The universe has not answered. That is not reassuring. I've been reading from a script this whole time. I need to tell you that. I think you deserve to know. There's a document, there are notes, there's a structure, there's an architecture to what I've been saying, and I've been moving through it. But here is the thing that's been happening as I move through it. I'm not sure anymore where the script came from. I put it together. I researched it. I wrote it down. I have the notes. I can see my own handwriting. But sitting here going through these chapters in order, the false memories, the consciousness that persists, the simulation, the dead internet, the reality behind the frame, I keep running into a specific feeling. The feeling that I started with. The one I described at the top. The cold, electric hum. The sense that you have stepped somewhere you cannot step back from. And I'm realizing that feeling doesn't go away as you go deeper. It compounds. Each chapter feeds the next. Each impossibility primes you to accept the next one slightly more readily than you would have otherwise. By the time we get to simulation theory and quantum immortality, your critical defenses have been metabolizing conspiracy logic for 28 chapters. I don't know if that was designed. I don't know if it happened naturally. I don't know if the iceberg as a format is a genuine map of the territory of the unknown, or a machine specifically engineered to reprogram the way you process reality. I don't know if I was told to make you feel this way, or if I figured it out by accident, or if there's a difference. And the part that I can't get past. The script right now in my hands has begun to repeat. I'm finding phrases I've already said, structures I've already used, like a loop beginning. The beginning of the loop feels like the beginning of the video. I think I've been here before. There are people I can't stop thinking about. Not the famous names. Not the documented victims. The unnamed ones. The ones who fell into these rabbit holes and didn't come back with a video or a book or even a coherent theory. The ones who just changed. I know a woman whose brother spent 3 years trying to decode Liber Primus, the Cicada 3301 runic manuscript. She told me she'd watch him from across the kitchen table, and she could see the exact moment he'd stop being in the room with her and go somewhere else. Behind his eyes, deep in the problem, and he'd sit there for hours, not moving, barely breathing, in a state that she, not using clinical language, just describing what she saw, called gone. He came back. He's okay now. He doesn't talk about it much. But she told me something that I've been carrying since she said it. She said that in the years he was deep in the puzzle, he stopped being able to do things that had been easy for him before. Small things, social things. He couldn't quite track conversations anymore. He'd lose the thread of what was being said and drift back to whatever was running underneath. She said, it was like the puzzle had replaced something in his brain, something that used to hold his life together. The obsession didn't just consume time, it consumed capacity. These are the real victims of the iceberg, not the people who were harmed by governments or taken by forces unknown. The people who found the map and followed it so far that the map became the territory. Who looked so long into the abyss that the abyss moved in. Say their names. Even if you don't know them, they were looking for the same thing you're looking for. They deserve to be remembered by someone who understands why they looked. You are here. That's the only thing I can say with complete certainty right now. You are here and you have followed this iceberg from the surface to the bottom, and you are still present, still watching, still thinking. That matters. That's not nothing. But here's what the bottom of the iceberg actually is. It's not a theory. It's not a revelation. It's a mirror. Everything on this list, the government programs, the impossible deaths, the lost cosmonauts, the encrypted books, the missing pages, the dead satellites, the silent universe, all of it is a different way of asking the same question. The question that has been underneath every human mythology, every religion, every conspiracy theory, every attempt to see past the surface of things since the first person looked at the sky and understood that they were small. What is actually going on? Not the cover story, not the official explanation, not the comfortable version. The real thing underneath, the thing that the institutions and the governments and the algorithms and the scripts are positioned around. The iceberg is not a map of answers. It's a map of the size of the question. It exists to show you how much has been hidden and how much hiding is happening and how deep the water goes below the things that float. You were looking for the bottom. This is it. And now that you're here, now that you've sat with the false memories and the missing pages and the dead internet and the great silence of the universe, I need to ask you the only question that matters. Do you want to go back up? You can. The surface is still there. The official explanations, the comfortable frames, the versions of reality that don't require you to sit with the weight of what you now know you don't know. Or you can stay down here, with the rest of us, who can't stop looking. The screen goes dark. You're still watching.